Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity just to talk to you this morning. We were going to put up a PowerPoint there, but we're just thinking we're far better off just explaining to people, because if you look at the plan, I think the most important thing that Bridgie has said there is the engagement that happened with your own community, like here in Clare, which I think for anything in terms of building that foundation, that anything else after that fails if that's not the case. And in being in those discussions with travellers, members of the traveller community in this county, in Ennis and beyond that, it's very clear people are living in an excluded, seriously marginalised environment, facing serious challenges on a daily basis. And what we try to do is to try and work those through. And I think the Minister made the point that, like in the plan, it's not to underestimate the challenge that's there. There are very, very, very serious challenges. And an awful lot of what you see in the plan is people talking about when you begin, those four areas that Bridgie mentioned probably begins with accommodation, because no matter what it is else that you try to do without a secure, safe home living environment, not only is it very difficult to move or make progress in anything else, but sometimes it can be a waste of money as well if you don't do that. So accommodation was very, very high on people's list, and that is reflected in the plan in terms of how do we live, how do we make sure that we respect our culture in the ways that we do live, how do we decide that we have a say over that, and most of all, how do we maintain and demand respect for the way that we live and our identity as people. So all these things come into the accommodation debate. But very important also, and when you moved on to the health agenda, what people were talking about, we can talk about physical health and we can look at the indicators and we can see that those are big issues. But I'd have to say that 90% of those discussions were serious, absolute concerns with mental health situations. So that's massive in terms of looking at what needs to be addressed. And when you look at where mental health and those challenges come from, and the absolutely horrific, unacceptable levels of suicide that there are within the traveller community, you can see that they're not isolated. You can see from people that are telling us they are related to everything else that's there. They're very much related to where you live, what progressions you have, chances you have in life. And very much related to the everyday levels of discrimination that people face on a day-to-day basis. So mental health was huge as a second area. And thirdly then, and very much related to that as well, is talking about progression, because where you talk about hope in the future, it's not about, and we can see again the walls and the barriers and all the kind of I suppose blockages that exist to people even accessing a progress, path to progress for training, for employment. And you can see that discrimination is not far away from there either in terms of recruitment, employment, and people face this, they know it and they live with it as an everyday reality. So how the plan as well then set out to how do you tackle that, how do you get beyond that. And then fourthly, what was called in the plan, and you can see it, is like identity and culture, because there's a very negative side in what travellers were saying in these discussions, and there's also a very positive side. And I think that one of the things that I would congratulate, even having known where you've moved already, even in terms of celebrating traveller culture and what was done in the Traveller Pride in terms of people's music, tradition, and being extremely proud of that on one side. But the other side, and the very serious reality, is that inside Irish society, if you face discrimination every day of the week in one form or another, you end up feeling not even a second-class citizen, probably a third-class citizen. And what that needs to actually, it's a broader struggle than just celebrating traveller culture. It's about challenging that and building up the capacity to challenge it. So one thing I would say, just in terms of people reading the plan, is that it was very, very clear from discussions with travellers that all these things are linked. They're not separate. I mean, there's 4 programs here to tackle accommodation, mental health, progression, cultural identity. But each and every one of those are related. They're all linked to each other. You improve one, you actually will make progress in the others. If you worsen one, you're in big trouble otherwise. So there isn't any point in getting forward in tackling discrimination or calling out human rights if you're still living in a slum. There's no point in actually saying that you want to get progression in your job if you're still facing that discrimination even when you get the job. So these things are all linked, and it was very clear in the plan that as you set up your working groups, those working groups need to link with each other. But I just leave you with 2 things that you can see it in the diagram that has turned out in the plan. That all of these things and everything that is being talked about here and being aimed at is important. 2 things that were very important right across all these programs. One is, and Bridgie has said it, and the Minister referred to it as well, is that the capacity of the traveller community to take this and lead it is absolutely, totally essential. And you don't have to look too far to look at other efforts that were made to tackle a lot of these things in terms of an outside influence, or someone else from a settled community saying, well, we know what's best for anybody, because it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. If anybody can show us where it has worked, that's great. So that kind of strength of the traveller community to build on what's already happened and been happening here is absolutely essential. The second thing is that the traveller community can't do this on its own, and that's very, very clear. So the alliances that have been built right across the statutory agencies, even to date, because this, even though as the planning was being done, this was already being carried out, and it can be seen that it is happening, but it needs a lot more focus, a lot more work. But those alliances and building those partnerships with statutory agencies, not an easy thing, because in a statutory agency, it's not easy to say, well, we don't really know what the solution is, we have to listen to you. It's kind of a culture change, isn't it? It's a challenge for people, but I think that it's absolutely essential. And the plan and everything that's here, even though very ambitious, even though serious amount of challenges to overcome, will work, I think, if those 2 things are borne in mind. The fact that it's traveller leadership that is absolutely critical and essential, and secondly, that the support and the real partnership, that kind of real equal partnership with statutory agencies are the 2 things that stand out. So that's just kind of a summary that Bridgie said, asked to give the summary, and the main points that I would see on it, but I know you might have questions or whatever. So thanks very much.